So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the meeting and the conversations that sound so rich. We can either put them on the parking lot,
Right. Or stop talking.
So I want to first thank you all for coming out on a Friday.
Rainy Friday.
Rainy Friday. And it's kind of last minute because we just met, but we met prior to getting our demonstrable indicators. So I sent some information out prior to, I wasn't sure if people understood because we actually were walked through in detail what the indicators were, or are, I should say were, what they are. But we also need to, as a team, I just want to kind of tell you what, so we have the level 1 indicators, which we can't do anything about. These level 1s, why do they do it like that, where there's stuff just, like this is solid, and then it like rolls up in here? Is there a way to not do that? Like, I need to see it all.
Well, you're not going to be able to see it all because of the size.
Yeah, kind of.
But you can adjust this.
What is here? Oh, I want it right there, but I don't have to
Well, I
scroll. I am not into scrolling.
So we'll just go through. So the first one, this ELA, students, and GP,
There's some more.
is school safety.
Yes.
So school safety is the first one. School safety has to do with what's called the SVI, which is your school violence index. So it's only certain incidences within a building that gets calculated in this performance. And I'm sorry, I gotta jump over my computer now because I can tell you where you're at the moment. Because I looked up some of this stuff where there's available data.
You want me to move it?
Yep. No problem.
And this is the blessing of having Rob, because he's the data,
He's the guru.
he is the guru. So here's the interesting, when we were first talking, we really thought that we were only gonna have like maybe 5 indicators in level 1, but we came back
Well,
and up here, we have 8. So these are measures that we have to meet.
Correct. So and each one of them is worth 6.25 points. So what they do is level 1 indicators are worth 50 points, level 2 indicators are worth 50 points. And then regardless of the number of indicators that are in level 1 or level 2, they simply divide it by 50 and come with a set number for each one of the indicators. So for level indicators 1, you have a total of 8 indicators, or is it 9?
8.
8, and they're at 6.25 points each. For your school safety, your progress target is 0.3, which is this 1819 in that salmon colored area. You're already at 0.4.
I know.
So that means you've already lost 6.25 points. You have not made that particular indicator, which is all the more important for the indicators that you select for level 2, because each one of those is going to be worth 10 points. And clearly, since we're now talking about demonstrable improvement and you need to reach 67 points, you want to do everything in your power to get to 67 points.
So here's the ironic, okay, because when I tell you, like, people are like, oh, you look so tired. I'm learning so much in such a short amount of time. It's overwhelming. And I'm the type of person, like, I process really slow, but once I get it, I have it. And so with the school safety, we're like, oh, we're doing so well because our suspensions are down. Like, we only have 2 suspensions. But here's the problem. The suspension is it happened at the beginning of the year, but one of our children bought a razor blade. And the razor blades, each from, what do you call the Vadar numbers,
It's considered a
from
weapon.
1 to 9, they all have different weights. And so that weapon has a heavy weight. And I think, and Rob, tell me, if we had more suspensions, would that be more helpful to bring the number down? I don't know.
It's the type of suspension, you're correct.
I'm like, I need to start suspending some kids.
We can look at it right now if that's what you want to do. But
Well, I mean, that might be a separate meeting that we need to look at, but, you know, if you don't truly understand what,
So it's based on the
Looking for-
severity of that ranking of what, because school safety encompasses so much,
yes,
that if it was more of a, you know, a threat, let's say, it's not a physical weapon, it wouldn't bear as much weight as bringing in a razor blade or a BB gun or
correct.
something like that. But, so the 0.3 is the target, and they're at
which would be
0.4,
based on a school baseline
Okay.
in 17, 18, and 0.4.
so they're on
we're
0.
looking for a 0.1 reduction in the.
So this is
So
our
they're going the
baseline
wrong way.
from 17, 18.
Okay,
Okay, but when Rob said it, currently right now, we're a 0.4.
right.
Okay, even though 17, 18, but this year in 17, 18, we had a BB gun.
Right,
We
right.
had a student brought a knife, and we had 2 students brought screwdrivers. But but that's what.
Alcohol, yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have multiple suspensions, but I think, and I could be wrong, because it was one child who had the 2 suspensions and the one was a heavy weight. It has a heavier consequence because you divide it by the number of students you have.
So currently for the 18-19 school year, you're at 0.4.
0.4.
So
Okay.
you've already not met that measure.
Yes.
Okay. And what do we have a measure from last year?
Last year was 0.4.
0.4.
So that's where you are. So you're
So that was
So we
That's what-
staying the same.
okay.
0.4 was the baseline.
Right, okay.
The state wanted you to go to 0.3. They're currently at 0.4.
Okay.
So they have not met the progress target. You've lost 6.25 points from section 1, which is why I'm saying that for selection of section 2,
Right.
it now is even more important to try to get as many points
I get
as
it.
possible.
Thank you.
For the next one, which is 3 through 8 ELA, all students NGP, and 3 through 8 math, all students NGP. This is based on student growth. It's looking at last year's exam to this year's exam, and how much did that student grow in comparison to other students in New York State, like students. In our district, what we're finding is that the majority of our buildings are between 46 and 48%. What that means is that 52% of the students in New York State are performing at a stronger level of growth than where you're at if it's at 48%. If it's at 46%, then it would be 54%. It's a 100% scale. For your baselines, you're at 44.1 and 46.6, which is roughly about where the district is at. You need to reach 45.1 and 47.6. What will be interesting is this will be the first year that we'll be able to compare the same test because we're using the same company 2 years in a row. Last year would have been the first time for that exam. So it's very much an unknown, unfortunately. But student growth is now also a part of our accountability system. And that's why they now added it into receivership. It was actually in cohort 1 as well, but now it's part of the accountability system, and it's now also part of the receivership system.
Can I ask another just really quick question? So it's 44.1 and you have to get to 45.1 for the ELA. Approximately how many students based on, or is that how you look at
You
it?
can't even answer it that way.
Okay.
because It's based on how well all other students do in New York State.
Oh, that's right, you
If
did.
everyone in New York State
I see.
does great, then your growth is probably going to be
Right.
adequate. If they do poorly, your growth, it all depends on what like students throughout New York State are measuring in that performance. So it'll only be grades in this building 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
Because there'll be nothing to compare grade 3 to.
That's not fair.
And it'll only be for students that have 2 exam scores.
Okay.
So if they don't have an exam score last year, they won't be included in this denominator.
Yeah, there is so many factors.
Against you. You know, and not against you, but again, it
But,
just doesn't,
yeah.
it doesn't, yeah, but,
So the next 2 are your 3 through 8 ELA, all students core subject performance index, and your 3 through 8 math, all students core subject performance index. Actually, we'll do the science too. Grade 4 and 8 science, all students core subject performance index. Performance index is the calculation of students that score a level 2, a level 3, or a level 4 on the New York State testing program. And then they do a calculation based on the number of students tested. So you do get credit for students that scored a 2, you get credit for students, you actually get additional credit for a student that scores at a 3, and then you get even more credit for a student that scores at a 4. If a student scores at level 1, they get no points at all. For almost all of your elementary schools, more than likely, these measures that we just went through, they'll have those measures as well. School safety for some of the schools, yes, for others, no, depending on what their baseline was last year. Chronic absenteeism, again, this is now part of receivership because it's now a part of our accountability system. For receivership, your school baseline is 21%, your progress target is 20%. At the moment, this is as of April 15th, you're at 17.2%. So this is still doable. It's just going to have to be monitored very carefully.
Is that including the pre-K?
No, I took those out. But what it doesn't include, because I'm not going to know that, are students that have 10 days of enrollment. So this is just based on what's in our analytics system, our data dashboard, and taking those students that are 10% chronically and greater. But from that, I'm not going to know which students had 10 days of enrollment for that clock to begin. For New York State, the clock begins only after the student has 10 days of enrollment. So that's why I'm saying the 17.2% is a good number to be at, because at the state level, more than likely the number is lower. But nonetheless, you're climbing up to 20%. So if you can start to monitor this very closely, this is likely a very doable measure to meet.
Well, this is after, but I want to work with you on how you got it because I remember a couple weeks ago.
I did April 15th. So I just did it last week during break. So that could be the reason for the difference. Not the first thing. Something after that. Is that the last one? ELP. So the 3 through 8 ELP success ratio of all students, that pertains to only your English language proficient students, your ELL students, or limited English proficient students, or English as a new language students. Different terminologies being used at the moment. That's looking at their first time they take a test when they enter and what their score is at that, and then for each year how they score and what is the range of growth. If you get the required amount of growth that the state expects, you receive credit for that student. If not, you don't. It's a little more involved than that, but that's overall how it works. If you make the growth, you get credit. If you don't make the growth, you don't get credit.
So can I just, for everyone, is this, they're looking at how they do on the New York State ELA and math test or the nicest slide?
It's the nicest slide.
And the nicest slide is their acronym for the English language learners
Correct.
specific test, and it goes over speaking and listening and.
So once there's different levels for the exam, and once a student reaches commanding, then they take the 3 through 8 New York State testing program administration as any other student does. But up until that point in time, they take what's called the nicest slot exam. So we'll be comparing those two exams. Okay? So for level 2, do you want me to continue or you want?
No, you did so good.
She had it all planned out.
I really did, but I'm like,
I don't know if this will move or not. I mean, do you want me to go through all these? Because some of them.
well, they already told us that we have to do.
There's 3 that have been selected for all schools, and that's plan a community model. You have selection of one of the tenants. The majority of buildings have selected parent and family and community engagement, which is one of the tenants for the diagnostic tool for school district effectiveness of DITSI review. And then the third one is expanded learning time. All of our schools have selected those. It's a district-wide initiative, and the first year, they're fairly reasonable targets. There's a rubric that you have to use, and there's metrics for the ELT. And then what that would allow you to do is you need to select 2 additional indicators. Those indicators will be academic indicators.
So with expanded learning, I thought that was no longer.
But that's extended day, that's what you mean?
Yes.
I thought there was no.
Time.
So the schools, like, I mean, you're expanded learning. You were.
We were, and our school base voted it for us not to be.
But I also thought that it was a budget cut. That expanded learning was a budget cut. So how are you going to measure that piece of it? I mean, how are you going to? How is that one of the? I know you're not the decision. I know.
Well, this is something that just came to us yesterday, and so they said that those were 3 indicators that all receivership schools they want us to do. And so, to my understanding, I'm thinking they're pretty optimistic that some funds might be coming our way.
Well, because an advantage that other schools may have, especially for the community school model, is that you're not funded, you don't have a community school coordinator for your school like other schools do.
Well, they were saying that, and they just gave us like a rubric, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, to go through with and look at what this entails.
Right.
You're talking about we need to have a partner, but they did talk about you would get a community coordinator.
Right, and that's the point I'm bringing up, is that with other schools that have community school coordinators, they have an advantage to help meet the goal of parent and community engagement when that's what that person's job responsibilities are. If the other schools don't have them, but you're kind of sounding like that they may be putting that into the schools.
Your first year would be essentially your planning.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
part of what are the best practices, what are the things that we know you need in order for this to be successful.
So,
But the question that I have is the planning just these couple of months? Or will the planning start September 2019 till
It would be this year.
be a school year.
It would be this year.
So we
Because
just
we're in
had
18-19 school
May,
year.
June, July, August.
Yeah, I'm afraid so, because these came out very late, right?
Plan would be for May.
The planning would have to occur by the end of the school year or during the summer. We're in the first year of implementation of receivership. So yes, it gives you a very
Short period of
time
planning.
span
Yeah.
for the planning of it, not the implementation of it, but for the planning of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, let me know what you need to, because we coordinate community schools, so I can.
So we could be we could be your school
Well,
instead
that's
of.
up to the district, but I would do it in kind advice, consultation.
Is that mean like a dinner?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So what it leaves for you are academic measures to be reviewing and to consider.
Because at the time before the district selected that all of the newly receivership schools do the 3 community expanded time. And also, I think I need to talk to everyone about extended day. They said that there's a rubric that we would have to follow, but it would be, it's not how we used to have, or used to,
That's my understanding.
how we did it in the past. So the state requires children to be in school 5.5 hours. Currently, we're in school 6.5 hours. So if
So you may have already met it.
well, if we're, next year, I think students are gonna be in school for 180 days. So we're already an hour in, so that's 180 hours additional, and for extended learning, they have to do 200. So we have to find 20 additional hours. And so it has to be open for the entire school population. So that's a little bit more reasonable than we were thinking like, oh geez, you know, we gotta find 200 additional hours on top of the 6.5 hours that we're doing.
So it has to be an additional 20 hours that's offered to
Yes.
the entire school population. So for
Yes.
example, on April break,
Yes.
you could do something through there and offer it to them, and if 40 show up, 50 show up.
Well, they said at least half of the school population needs to show up.
Okay.
But they said you could also do something like Saturday schools,
Right,
or,
right.
you know, if we wanted to do.
A ramp up,
Ramp up, yeah.
summer program. I mean, that part is up to you.
But you could extend your day.
Yeah, we could
You can
extend our
extend
day
it
with
without it being an
days.
after-school program.
Yeah.
That if it's focused on academic achievement or whatever, you the teacher.
Say like on
yeah.
Tuesdays and Thursdays,
Yeah.
we're gonna have the extended day.
And I think the other three components of it are, it has to be an enrichment program of some sort, based on academics, and there also has to be opportunity for PD for the staff.
Mhm.
And the other like three components.
One thing that we discussed, forgetting how many days ago now, but over at School 19 was possibly doing something where you invite parents to try to get more community interaction with the school and as well as the students, and if they're normally home that week, some parents are probably around to possibly get involved in something like that, and that might be, community school building sort of exercise.
That sounds good. It sounds kind of similar to, we tried it one summer where we had the parent academy. So when we did our summer school, we also had summer learning for the parents, so that they really knew what expeditionary learning was. And so we took parents through like an entire expedition of ELA and kind of like math, and the feedback was pretty positive, but the thing is we just didn't sustain it, keep it going.
So I'm going to flip back to indicator one for just a moment, because for your indicator for the level ones that the state selects for you, those are based on all student subgroups. At level two, it's the same measures, but it's now looking at different subgroups. So typically one of the things that you should think about, consider is what are the subgroups that we're struggling with, but you also want to make sure that it's a subgroup that's large enough, that you have enough students that you can actually make a difference. Because if you get a very small subgroup, that doesn't give you much leeway. More than likely, it'll be for ELA, math, and let's just look here. So the three subgroups that you have for MGP, which is mean growth percentile, which has to do with student growth. It's looking at only your 4th grade, your 5th grade, and your 6th grade. And it's looking at what did they do last year in comparison to this year, and how much did they grow in comparison to other students. You have 3 through 8 economically disadvantaged, that's what ED stands for. 3 through 8 math, Hispanic students. 3 through 8 math, economically disadvantaged. Typically, I tell buildings to stay away from growth because it's very much an unknown. You don't have any idea. You don't know what's going on in the rest of New York State. It's very difficult to control. And the fact that your baselines for these 3 subgroups, except for your math economically disadvantaged, so 43.2 is a fairly low growth rate. And for the math Hispanic, 42.8 is fairly low. 47, you're getting higher. So the concern is if it's a high, The growth rate, where is that going to bring you to? Because the additional piece of the puzzle is in our district, what we're finding is that we're flatlining with growth. We're getting right around 48, and then it's just stopping. So it's that additional question, and that's where it needs teacher input. It needs that feedback of knowing every student by face and by name, and what do you honestly think these students are going to do, knowing that ELA is already completed and math is next week, right? For the next section, they're talking about gaps between groups. So the first one is 3 through 8 ELA, students with disabilities, level 2 and above, gap with non-students with disabilities. And what they simply do is they take the percentage of students that score a 2, 3, or 4 for special ed, and they take the percentage of students for general education, 2, 3, and 4, and whatever the difference is between that percentage, that's the gap. And they expect that gap to narrow. So an example would be, let's say you have 10 special education students, you have 10 general education students. For the 10 special education students, we'll say that 3 of them scored a 2, 3, or 4. 3 divided by 10 would be 30%. We'll say for the general education students, we had 5 out of the 10 score a 2, 3, or 4. 5 divided by 10 is 50%. 50% minus 30% is a 20% gap. That's what they're looking for you to narrow. The problem with that is in our district, what we're finding is the gap is not narrowing. So I also, when I'm out talking with buildings about this, I don't think those are smart choices to pick. What we're finding is if the general education students go up, the students with disabilities go up. It's not one or the other goes up, they're all going up. So the gap is not narrowing.
And isn't that one kind of hard as well, because until we as a district, our special ed continuum kind of equalizes, because
So at the moment, right, there's all the conversation about what should be the tiered instruction with RTI, and there's all those different adjustments in the audit being done with special education. There's, again, a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I was just thinking I think more of movement, because this year we got 2 brand new classes.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about actual, operational.
Operational,
Mhm.
yeah.
100% impacts this. And remember, that's simply a subset of your ELA math performance. So why pick a measure that you already know based on background history? Our gap is not narrowing in our district, and then that what we're finding is if one group goes up, the other group goes up, so that gap is just remaining the same. So your next choices would be your ELA, students with disabilities, your 3 through 8 ELA Black Core Subject Performance Index, your 3 through 8 ELA Hispanic Core Subject Performance Index, and probably economically disadvantaged after that.
Yeah, it should be.
I can't go any further than the county page. Oh, here we go. 3 through 8 ELA economically disadvantaged. Then for math, it's students with disabilities, Black, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged. So it gives you the 4 same subgroups. My recommendation would be, if I was talking with the principal, to look at your larger subgroups, to know what you think your students are going to be able to accomplish this year. Economically disadvantaged is going to give you the largest denominator to work with, and that's going to be your Black students, your Hispanic students, your students with disabilities, and your English language learner students. So in terms of creating a culture within the building and the discussion, it just involves everyone. It's a more comprehensive approach. I wouldn't suggest picking 2 ELA or 2 math. I would say pick 1 ELA and pick 1 math, because you'll want to put all your eggs in one basket. By having the 3 that are non-academic, those are more doable, so that's hopefully 30 points, and that means you have another 10 points that you really need to focus on for those 2 areas. That's it.
Does anybody have any questions or anything? Because we have to submit our thoughts, which levels we want by May 1st. Yeah,
Remember, they're subsets of level 1.
and what we select is what we keep for the next 3 years.
How many have to select?
So again,
How many do you have to select?
5. Well, really 2,
Two for the
because they've already chosen.
other three. Okay.
Yeah.
So the gap one, so it's special ed compared to, I'm gonna generalize, but to general ed students.
Correct.
Isn't that kind of like comparing apples and oranges in regards to the level of disabilities that the special ed, like how do they determine?
So this goes
The
back
population.
To it goes back to No Child Left Behind.
Okay.
Right? And no child being left behind and trying to narrow the gap.
Right.
Between any subgroup, whether it's ELL students and non-ELL students, or whether it's general ed, students
Right.
with disabilities, it follows the same type of pattern. It's anybody who's identified as a special education student, any classification. So if they have an IEP, they would be a part of that denominator.
No matter how significant the disability
Makes no
is,
difference.
if they're at a third grade level and the general ed's third grade level.
As long as they're taking that 3 through 8 or the NISA, because
Right.
your NISA results also are included in with your performance index calculation. Those students would
Hmm.
also be taken into
That's
account for
interesting.
this.
Yeah, that's,
You're teaching me a lot today. Is what
I
And
really,
here, and this is the thing that like I also think about, and what I've noticed, there's some trends that have happened for our school. So for maybe the past, I want to say 3 or 4 years, we've had a large turnover with 5th grade. So we've lost a lot of 5th graders, and then we get a good number of new 6th graders. And so it's tricky when you're trying to select these numbers because you think like, oh, I'm gonna, I got this one narrowed out and.
You're basing it on the current population you have.
Mhm.
That is tough.
Same thing with special ed placement.
Yeah.
So same thing with special ed placement. I mean, we could go into, next year and Cam could get a notification that she's got, 7 or 8 new special ed students who are just being plopped on our door. And we have no idea what they are or, how they're performing.
100%.
Or if you lose a whole group, if you lose a 12-1-1 or whatever. I mean, again, that's a really good point.
And we're losing
We're losing
a whole bunch of special ed students going into next year because they're transitioning out. They're 607s.
Yeah. So like that's what I've been asking Rob. So I'm like, ah, should we pick a gap? Because then I was like, maybe we can pinpoint. I'm thinking to myself like, oh, next year I know that we're gonna have a 2nd grade ICOT class, which is the special ed and gen ed. We can start, looking at them and maybe giving some of them some more intense interventions, and then when they get ready for 3rd grade. But then, if I remember correctly, Rob was like, well, no, in one of these categories, they don't look at 3rd grade because you don't have anything to compare it with. Because 3rd grade would be their first year. I'm like,
What percentage of special ed students do you have right
we
now?
have about 12%. Because we have
So it's a small
79.
population.
Yes, it's not.
So would it be a benefit to pick that one based on a smaller population of special ed students?
No,
Or not?
Just speaking with Rob and also like the chiefs and everybody, it'd be smarter to pick one of the core subject.
Okay.
One of the core subject performance indicators.
It gives you a larger playing field.
Because it's total population
Yeah.
and it's not split up comparable for compare. Okay.
So like
I
for
like that.
instance, Rob had told me when we were breaking down the data that if we were to pick the 3 through 8 math and the ELA ED, economically disadvantaged,
Mhm.
core subject performance indicators, I believe he said there was like 216 students that we have from 3 through 6. And then we would have to then make sure, or, you know, our goal would be, I think was like 55 students to meet our target for 18-19.
I'll give you the numbers in just a
Yeah,
second. I'm just
correctly.
looking to see what last year's results were.
And it's like, I find it kind of interesting, like, you know, I don't want to be under this pressure, but it's like, wow, if I knew this from the beginning, we would never be on.
Right.
So last year, for your students with disabilities, you had 60 students that were continuously enrolled and tested. So when the state does their accountability, they don't look at all students that are tested. They look at students that are in your school on Beds Day, which is the first Wednesday in October, and then are they there for the administration of the exam? If they don't fall within that parameter, they're not included in your accountability. And the accountability calculations are what's used for receivership. So last year, it was,
That's important. No.
but that's typically a positive, right? So if somebody came this week, they're not going to be included in your math results for accountability purposes. When they look at your 3s and your 4s, when they talk about proficiency, they will be in that number. But for accountability purposes, those students are excluded. 8 students that were at 2, 3, or 4. For general education students, there was 138, and there was 49, 50, 51, there was 68. So that's a considerable difference. If that's what you want to pick, you're going to have to be assured and confident that you're going to be able to narrow that gap this year, next year, and the following year. And I'm just looking at ELA.
What subgroup was that again?
General education students and students with disabilities. This is last year's results.
Nine kids who actually passed with 2
For ELA,
out of 60.
9 out of
it
60.
sounds like a
9
really
out of
large gap.
Huge gap.
Yeah, we need to stay away from gaps.
So now I'll go back to what Cam was referring to in terms of the number of students that you need.
I think this is a good exercise because it makes you look at like,
So I'm just going to start with the all-student subgroup, so now I'm looking at level 1 indicators. You have 218 active students. The progress target is 54.2 points. In order to reach that, you need 60 of your students to score a level 2. So if you had students that scored a level 3 or level 4, it's only going to reduce that number. But that's based on your active enrollment at this moment. The accountability cohort is going to be smaller than that, which means that the number of students that you're going to need will also be smaller. This wasn't intended for this purpose. This was intended for you to know what's the greatest number of students I need in order to be self-confident that I can meet this progress target.
So you said 60 out of 218?
60 out of 218.
that you're like, oh, we can do that.
Sounds right.
It sounds, but what past practice, that hasn't been the case. You know, when you have like 71% of your students testing and getting a level 1, you know, it's really disheartening.
I know.
Yeah, last year there were 122 students that scored a level 1 out of 198.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's broken down by grade level and all that, right?
It does break it down by grade level, but not for receivership. It's just all students across the board.
Because I'm just thinking about like the 607, the ones that are out of here. You know, did they help the number? Did they carry it? Or did they?
Well, they were the baseline.
They would be
Some of them
right.
were part of the baseline, and some of them did that moved
Did-
on, did really well.
Right.
Right, I mean, that's the other consideration is each cohort of students is different, right? They all have different needs and they have different levels of proficiency and standards that they understand and that they're struggling with both ways. So if you picked something to do with students with disabilities, at the moment you have 78 active students. It's not a small number, but that's not a real large number when last year you only had 8 students that were a level 2, 3, or 4. For your for your black students, there's 162 active students. And this would be at the end of marking period 2. Actually, this would be for March. This is based on the student data profile. So these numbers could be, different by now. For Hispanic, you have 38 active students. I would definitely stay away from that. That's much too small. Your economically disadvantaged, again, is 218 students. That's a good pocket of students to be able to know what you need to do, be able to have your NWA results, have different sort of assessments that are going on to be able to gauge what's happening within the building. So that would be my suggestion, but it's entirely up to you and your team.
The higher number, the 218.
The higher, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we have to. I mean, I think
so
we,
too.
I mean, putting us aside and teachers and everything for them, for the student. I mean, we have to do that. We have to, and I think that's, I think it's going to be a challenge. But, and I believe me, I am not an educator. I don't know but I have a strong appreciation for what everybody does, and I think we can do it.
I think we
My
can
glass
do
is
it too.
half
It's
full.
going to be a lot of work, but I think we also want to put our odds at a better.
Absolutely.
So we need to have a bigger denominator. So
The progress targets are very doable if you're moving in the right direction. Bottom line. And you don't need to reach 100 points.
Right.
You need to reach 67 points.
And we all know that your academic progress increases when there are supports within a building, not only for students, but for staff. And you bombard a school with as much of a seamless support system as possible. It's much more intricate than that, but that's really what, and I'm just talking about the schools that we've had experience that have come out of receivership, and I've met with the state numerous times in regards to that, is the importance of seat time and having the kids in class.
Absolutely.
So,
Which kind of dovetails in with picking community school model,
Right.
family community engagement,
Exactly.
and expanded learning time.
Exactly.
It's a wise strategic move.
yeah. And they're looking for that. The state's looking for that. I mean, that's what they're,
One would hope.
yeah.
since
Well, the state that I talk to.
what do you know entails community schools? Like, what are the criteria?
You and I strongly encourage you to do, take some of your staff along with your assistant principals next Saturday at East High School. The Center for Urban Education out of U of R is doing a whole, from 8 to 12:30 on community schools. There's a parent community engagement piece. I'm actually sitting on the panel for that. There's a policy piece that Elaine is going to sit on, CCS eyes on. That right there will tell you, when people think of community schools, they think of, inviting people in, and, it is about support systems. But you have to build a community within your building first before you invite anybody else in. You don't need 50 partners or 40 partners. You need partners that meet the needs of all your key stakeholders of your building. And the schools that are funded for community school coordination have many more opportunities for resources than the schools that don't. They go on field trips to New York City and really get to see, all different places to get to see what that's all about. But I strongly encourage, and I'll forward you that for next Saturday.
Yeah, there's been things that.
Yeah, and I know a number of people are going to
Yeah,
that.
but we just found out yesterday that we have to be a community school, so I said, I better attend these sessions.
Mhm.
But I was like,
Yeah, I would recommend anybody to go there because you really understand the community school model, and it doesn't have to be a neighborhood school to be a community school model. It doesn't. I mean, it should be, but but you'll learn a lot.
Do you know of an elementary school that you should maybe reach out to?
was 17 more
17,
on
17, 45,
45.
45, and we also do community school coordination at Rise. It's our first year at Rise. Number 3, we're over there too, but that's in transition. So that one, I mean, nothing against it, they're just going through a transition.
Mm-hmm.
But I would do 17 definitely, 45 definitely.
Yeah, one thing that we've been talking with the NSC, the Neighborhood Service Center, we talked with Daisy Algarin, who is the director of the NSC, and trying to get an idea of what could the city do to work with the schools to try to build up the schools, and the schools build up the neighborhoods, basically. And one thing that they suggested was possibly, because we had mentioned that it's sometimes hard to get teachers to go out to knock on doors and recruit people from the neighborhood, and they said, well, we do outreaches periodically where they'll go out with police officers and code enforcement folks and various departments that the city has, and try to inform the neighborhood of things that are available for them. And this might be something that could be blended in with getting teachers out to knock on doors looking for specific students that might be interested in going to the school. Now, one of the big things that we've been pushing for that is local busing, but you're in an interesting position right now because you're across town from where you're going to be. So you could recruit, kindergartners and first graders and second graders and be guaranteed to have busing here. And then by the time you get back there, hopefully we'll have gotten some of this local busing thing resolved. The other thing we're doing, we're trying to schedule getting together with the mayor, because I was over at her State of the City address there, and she was very much in favor of community schools, and we've got to work on that to try to maximize the benefit to all the schools that we've been working with. But, and the superintendent, the interim superintendent, and Linda Samuz, John Lang and I went in and talked with them about 3 weeks ago, and they're all in favor of having local busing. The thing is, how do you affect it? So that might be something to work with the neighborhood service centers and doing some local recruiting around where School 10 is going to be going back to.
Okay, let me give you one more recommendation. And I'm not going to pull it up this other that will play into both the academic and the social emotional piece of it. With community school coordination, the initial thing that all schools do is a needs assessment for all the key stakeholders. Okay, so for the teachers, the staff, the students, and the parents and any community members in there, because we're really good as adults thinking we know what everybody wants and what the needs are of young people. What having a needs assessment does, it really identifies what some of those barriers are that young people face that we just may not know about. And then we have the opportunity to build programming and support services around them in order to meet the needs of the social emotional piece that then will enhance the academic piece. And we can talk more about that. But I think it would be important. And you'd start that at a new school year, not at the end of the school year.
Okay.
So.
The other thing about it is all receivership schools have to do it. So it gives you,
There you go.
right, team.
Mhm.
It gives you collaboration. It gives you somebody to work off of and network with. And
Right.
bounce ideas off of. So I think it's a good move.
Mhm.
So just to kind of pull this meeting together, it sounds like for the 5 indicators, we have the 3 that we have to do, the community school, extended time, and then one of the tenants, which which goes along with community schools and family, because the other ones are either dealing with curriculum or,
Or curriculum.
Yeah.
Is
Or more
It's
curriculum.
all curriculum, okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's,
Okay.
and then I think if I saw kind of consensus that we agree that we're gonna go with the core performance that had the highest population, which is
Right.
the
218.
economically disadvantaged. So we'll do that with PLA and math. And I think that we should be good. But I have a question for you, Brock, real quick. So let's say if, and you may not know this, but let's say if one of the tenants, or not one of the indicators, like family engagement, and they come through because they have to come and do like a visit, and then they rate us, right? Can we get like partial points, or is it just all or nothing?
So it's based on a rubric, and I don't think it's like all or nothing.
Okay.
You get points because part of it is the planning, and then it goes into that needs assessment. Where are you, and what have you been able to put in play? What do you want to put in play, and what's the evidence that shows that?
Right. But you definitely get partial, because I know going through a 45 school, and I'll be honest with you, the family engagement one was the most in community.
Yeah, that was
the
kinda
most
difficult.
difficult one because we all know about family engagement. I mean, it's, but that's where you really need to be creative and think out of the box and determine what do you call family engagement. What does it look like? But you do, you'll get your points for, your open houses and your, that piece of it. But when you do something different, if you're offering on Saturdays a family class on cooking or whatever it is, that's what they're, but just.
Can you pull up on your computer what you sent to us?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Because
yes.
this answers your question. And go to 10.6, phase 1.
One thing my eyes and
Well, if you didn't have 4 of them, then it wouldn't be a problem.
okay. Okay, so it's the dictionary.
The comprehensive,
Oh, the phases. Okay, that one.
this is what's going to answer your question. And you'll see that many of these you probably already do. It starts on page 33.
Okay.
So for 10 and 6 phase 1, this has to do with family and community engagement. Of these bullets, this is what the rubric is based off of. And you have to reach 90% of these phase 1 items. So just read through some of those.
Can you see it still?
Even if I moved out,
We'll read it to you.
So the question more is, do you have evidence of it? Because most of this you probably already do. Most buildings do this. Doesn't mean that you do it and excel at it. It simply means you do it. You have it there.
So with this, we have to make sure we have 90%.
So would this be like taking pictures, like, we were just talking about like the office staff styling, should we go into the office and just take a picture of them smiling?
I don't know what, right?
But like,
Some of this is
evidence,
really
how do we show this? Just,
I don't know. I can't answer that because I haven't been on a DITS review in a
You
very
do
long
90%
time.
of those.
90% of phase 1.
Right.
And then what
So
they
now go to phase
said,
2.
so phase 2,
So when do you move from phase 1 to phase 2?
oh, sugar.
It's not even moving from one phase to the other.
It's
It's
just kind of
just
all
section
happens, okay.
So for phase 2, you need to have 40% of phase 2. And I think there's a total of like 24 bullets. So that means you would have to reach 10 of those.
Mhm.
And I don't recall a building ever having an issue with this in terms of selection of this for receivership and, in meeting these targets. Phase 1, I don't think there's going to be any question about it at all. Some of the ones in phase 2, the buildings were unsure of, or they weren't sure if they had documentation of it or some sort of evidence of it.
I think the thing, like, when I think of, well, no, here's some more, right there.
Can you blow that up to 100 and let me try it?
Yeah.
So they're not looking at the numbers,
No, they're just
because what I
40%, 90%.
all right.
But I think it
They
might
do-
have
they-
changed since, like 45 and 9 and their cohort 1.
22,
I think their
They used a
different rubric.
Because I remember them sitting down and we would talk about these, but they wanted to know. So how many families came to orientation? Like how many?
So you'll want documentation of those type
Yeah.
of things for the quarterly reports for receivership.
Right.
But for cohort 1, it was actually based on the DITSE review system. And this isn't. This is just based on the phases. So they've started to do a shift in
I like
the
that shift. I think
DITSE
that's already had.
based on what they're
Because
doing this
it's
year.
right there,
And you do a lot of that
Mhm.
stuff.
And that's the thing. is
Some of it needs to be
majority
tweaked,
of
but
it-
yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And based on the needs assessment, this also gives you a great next
See
step.
how
Yes.
this last bullet right
Definitely.
here, about what we've been talking about.
Mhm.
Cultures and stuff. So, and then the phase 3,
That, not for now.
not now?
It's just phase 1 and phase 2.
Oh, I thought we had to have some phase 3.
I don't believe so.
Can you see it, Dee?
How many kids do you have here that have come because of Hurricane Maria?
We weren't impacted by hurricane, but I know some of my other schools that have like a bilingual program, 9, 28, 35, they got a lot. Monroe,
58 guys on.
yeah.
Yeah.
We might have gotten 1 or 2, but it not like them. Like they got like 80 kids or 90 or even more.
It's not relevant to this, I was just curious, and,
Well, it does have some relevance because they were talking about, for some of the schools, it impacted their chronic absenteeism.
Yeah.
Because then you're talking about, here now you're dealing with students who have lost their homes, and so Sharon Jackson at School 9 said that, she's a community school where we had children who loved the water, but now because of the hurricane, they're afraid to swim. And so she provided swimming lessons for the families on the weekends to try and, make it a little bit so they're not as fearful. So, it's just things like that.
Good question.
But it is, yeah.
But, what I was thinking was if you had a bunch of kids here from Puerto Rico, why not have a Puerto Rico Day? And where everybody learns about Puerto Rico and the fact that everybody that lives in Puerto Rico is an American.
Well,
They're not a foreigner.
the goal is now is that we're gonna be embedding people's cultures in the curriculum all year long, not just having a day, because we just wanna make sure that all of our students are valued. So that's something that we're really working on.
They're having a serious problem with that in Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah, they are.
So we don't always have to recreate something either, because
No,
we
we
got a
don't.
swimming pool where we need that, maybe you do that.
Yeah, we just have to get the construction workers out there.
Cam, can you do me a favor and go back to your original document that you had open? Because it'll show you the requirements for the next 3 years for that tenant. So it's the one that looks like this.
Oh, okay.
Jeez.
And we can't hold Rob too long. He got tickets to
Hamilton?
Hamilton.
Yes.
Oh.
12.
You gonna make
Very
us
excited.
Don't miss it. I saw it last night.
You did.
Yeah, somebody else,
Excited.
Kevin Klein, the principal at Integrated Arts, he was like, I got to go. I gotta go.
Yeah, you can't miss that.
It'll be an experience in your life.
Oh, I can't wait.
So that's where mine's at right now.
Oh, what a wonderful experience.
Not Hamilton,
Oh.
eventually.
That's another good experience.
Well, we played some of the music, the edited music, because we did the American Revolution this year. So it was like so cool to do, things like that.
Well, the king sings 3 times.
Only 3?
Yeah, it's great.
I can't wait.
That parking lot was so full out there in chunks of town. It's all in Home Depot parking, people.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
People were buying tickets for that like last month, right?
Yeah.
So you get 40% of tenant 6 phase 2 indicators are common across the school. In addition, the school must also have 90% of phase 1 indicators common across the school. That goes to 50% and to 67%. Next 2 years.
Well, what tenant?
They're all the same.
Oh, what is
Doesn't make any difference. They're all the same in terms of the criteria.
Okay.
It's just me jumping around here. That's not a big jump to go to 40 to 50%. 67%, it depends on how effective 1920 school year is going.
But it says, look, it says we have to have at least 6 tenant, phase 3.
That's for 2020.
Right, see, this is 2021, 1920, and 1819. So for this year, you need 40% of tenant. So this is for probably one of the other tenants, just because I can't get this to do what I wanted to do. So
Well,
this,
there's tenant 6.
yeah, but it's the same. The criteria is the same for regardless of what tenant it is. So if I look at the other tenant and the other tenant, it's going to tell you the same information for each year. So it's 40% tenant 6 phase 2, and then what it says down here that you can't read, and if I jump, it goes to the next tenant, it's 90% of phase 1, which is what we just went through.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to also say is, it also says across the school and at least 4.
So that, for the next year,
Yeah,
yes.
the following year, so, because we were saying that we wouldn't have to hit any of the phase
No, for this year.
for this year,
Next
yes.
year, you go into phase 3, and in the subsequent year, you go into phase 3.
Mhm. Okay. Yep, well, we're wrapping up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to Hamilton, but I'm still going home.
Please don't go to my job.
So, does anybody have any questions or anything?
You got what you need?
I got what I need. I needed to let the team know. And then our next meetings will just be, we might need to maybe break our committee up into our different, like whether curriculum, instruction, and then we can start moving from there and how we're gonna move.
So start planning what's.
We just couldn't come together on the plan.
Mhm.
Plan.
Mhm. So,
Yeah, thank you very much. This was an excellent
Thank you.
review of what we needed.
thank you, Rob, you